Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hi there, welcome back. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer, and on the line with us today, also from the Central Time Zone, if that makes a difference to anyone, is Kathryn Valentine. Who's Kathryn Valentine? What? You don't know Kathryn Valentine from the Go-Go's. So, hello, Kathy, and how are things going for you these days?
They are just pretty okay, all things considered, and thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you and your listeners.
Thank you very much. This is great. So, Kathryn Valentine with the Go-Go's now. Your first gig was a New Year's Eve kind of thing with the Go-Go's, is that right?
Yes, I'll try to nutshell this. I had moved to LA when I was 19 years old in search of fame and fortune, and had been a musician for a while. This is all in my book, All I Ever Wanted. It's a really cool coming-of-age rock and roll literary memoir. But I'd been in LA for a couple of years, and I met the guitar player, Charlotte, from the Go-Go's, who approached me saying they had 8 sold-out shows in 5 days, and could I play the bass? And because their bass player couldn't do it, and I was like, okay, okay. And I had never played the bass in a band before, and I didn't know their songs, obviously, because I wasn't in the band. So it was a crazy 4 or 5 days of learning a set and learning a new instrument, and that's actually where I start the book, because it was such an exhilarating launch of kind of a life-changing experience. And I kind of start the book with that night, that, meeting her and the work I put in and playing those shows, and how I fell in love with the Go-Go's, learning off that little cassette tape. I'm like, this band is so good. They have such good songs. This is why I moved to LA. This is how I'm going to make it. I just knew.
That's good. And I just to interject here, I was in Los Angeles long before you were born. I think I saw Star Wars at the Chinese theater when it first came out way back then. And I, without sounding too metaphysical here, because I'm an old fart who knows nothing, I just got this magic sense when I was there for a couple of days that this was a place that anything could happen. I don't know if I was kind of projecting something out there that didn't exist, but is that kind of the feeling you had when you were there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. And it was just like, and I write about this so much in my book. I really wanted to get across to my readers the feelings of what it felt like. It was important to me that, even if you weren't a fan of the Go-Go's or aren't a fan of the Go-Go's, that you'd still find something to resonate in this story, which I think I really succeeded at, considering all the feedback I've gotten. But that was one of the things I keep stressing, was just like in Los Angeles, everybody kind of went there with this goal to kind of left their hometowns. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And it kind of infuses the atmosphere and the air with this sense of possibility. I mean, you could be playing a show and there might be 3 people there, but one of them could be someone that could change everything. That's just how it is there.
And that sense of playing for just 3 people, you still gave it all you had, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've now been in bands. I don't think too many 61-year-old women can say this, but I have been in bands nonstop for about 45 years. I mean, the Go-Go's is my most visible and most successful venture as a musician. But when I'm not in the Go-Go's, which is, a lot of times now, I've always been in another band, super bands, great bands with great musicians, great songs. But success is elusive for anyone wanting to make it in the music business. And it's one of the reasons I really cherished and felt blessed, and still to this day feel so blessed for the career I got to have with that band, because I do it no matter what. I mean, I'll go play a tour, and we'll play to, theaters, or we played arenas, we played all kinds of amazing gigs, festivals, and I'll come home with my local band and lug my amp out in the trunk of the car and go play the club downtown, to 80 people or 100 people. And I love that too. I've gotten to experience the full range of being a working musician.
And we're talking with Kathryn Valentine right here, right now. And the reason in the main is to talk about her and her life and success, but also because this is mainly a book type show, books and writing and stuff. The book is All I Ever Wanted, a rock and roll memoir by Kathryn Valentine, and that's Kathy and Valentine. And Kathy, what made you want to write a memoir?
Well, there's a number of things. I felt like I had a compelling story, which I do have a compelling story, and I think it's important that women in music tell our stories, because when I was growing up, when I was a teenager in the 70s and first picked up a guitar, I had no role models. There was no one to look up to, and I've since found out that there were a lot of women that were playing in bands and stuff, but their stories weren't out there. And even though it's not as, it's not like a novelty anymore, or some kind of freakish accident that a woman plays rock and roll, I still think it's important that we tell our stories and our successes and the obstacles and just what it felt like to achieve a dream come true. So there was all that, wanting to tell that story, wanting to be a writer. I really enjoyed writing. I felt like I was a good writer, and thought, well, how do I transition from just being a cool girl in a cool band to being taken seriously as a literary writer? And the only way to do it is to start writing books. And I felt like a memoir was a great first book, because, you're not really competing with every literary genius that's coming out of every
right,
and the MFA program or whatever. I'm telling the story that only I can tell, and I knew that it had to be a really raw, a really compelling, a really resonant story, because otherwise, why was anybody, I'm not the star of the band, I'm not the lead singer. The bass player is generally somebody that's a little bit more in the background, which I always liked. I liked being kind of more behind the scenes and writing songs. I wrote some of our hits and arranged things a lot, and was very active, more behind the spotlight than in the front. So when I write a book about my life and my experiences, it can't be like, oh, here's this big star telling you what it was like to become. It's got to be, here's a human being that anybody can relate to. Well, not anybody, I'm sure. I'm not saying that, but a lot of people.
And we're with Kathryn Valentine today, talking about her book, All I Ever Wanted, a rock and roll memoir about her life before, during, and after, and with the Go-Go's, which of course is the most successful all-girl rock and roll band. You wrote your own songs, you played your own instruments, unlike, well, the Monkees were okay, but they were manufactured. Back to the memoir. Secret to writing a memoir? Do you have any tips you can pass on to any would-be memoir writers that we have in the world?
Well, I would say that one thing I would like to say is that, I've done a lot of self, examination and growth and therapy and whatnot, and nothing has been as effective and as deep and as profound and as cheap as writing a memoir. It really caused me to go in and heal on so many levels and process things that I don't think I'd ever quite really processed. A lot of very difficult things in my adolescence, relationships with kind of absent parents. I was really left to my own, and from as long as I can remember, feeling like that it was my job to take care of myself, that nobody else was going to do that. It was up to me. And so writing this and putting this kind of the chaos of your past onto paper and making some order of it is such a wonderful experience. So I think for memoirists, I think to write very bravely, to be very brave and very vulnerable. And I think they go hand in hand. And write it all down, and then you can go through it again, and the stuff that really you're not comfortable with or you feel like infringes on someone else's privacy, you can start editing it out. But on the first pass, I believe in just getting it all on the page, and I believe in blood on the page. I mean, I really think you need to. But then there's that thing with judgment, and I had a lifetime of being a musician and learning to trust my judgment and my style, which is really about what do you leave in, what do you take out. I have to do that with songs. I have to do that with notes on my instrument. I have to do that as a producer, like, is this too much? Am I overloading it? Am I not giving the melody room to breathe? I was really experienced in the act of using my judgment, and I trusted it, and I just transferred that right over to my writing. And I think that's a really key thing for anybody in art, is to trust your judgment and be, don't be afraid to take risks, but also, only you can decide like what should be taken out, what should be left in. And my mantra was blood on the page without being a bleeding, gaping open wound, because that's not entertainment either. You want the feelings across, but you don't want to like be wallowing in self kind of blame or shame or any of that. Then it just gets kind of like bleh.
And I think a memoir, to be successful in the writing and in the reading part, it has to be honest, right? You can't hold back, and you can't say, well, I can't say this about so and so, it might hurt his or her feelings. Maybe you have to say what you feel. Is that right?
Well, that's judgment about what. Yeah, I wouldn't write anything unless it was completely honest and completely, like I said, brave and vulnerable. But my job was not to write other people's stories. So I was very careful about, I didn't write anything about someone else unless they were okay with it, first of all, or that they had talked about it in the past. Like, we had some drug issues in the Go-Go's, but they had been talked about a lot in interviews and documented in documentaries and stuff like that. So I was comfortable writing about some things, but as far as specific anecdotes and whatnot, I was not going to, tell anybody else's secrets or stories.
Uh-huh.
My mom had the most at risk, and I asked my mom every time I was going to write something that might have presented her in not the best light. I'd say, are you comfortable with me writing this? And my mom was so supportive, and she said, I want you to tell your story. It was more important to her that she support me in this than her looking like the best mom. And I really appreciated that.
And Kathy Valentine is with us talking about In the Main, her memoir, All I Ever Wanted, a rock and roll memoir, also with her life in the Go-Go's. Did you found then writing a memoir was therapeutic then?
Yes, very, very therapeutic. Absolutely.
And back to the Go-Go's, you replaced a person who was ill. Was it kind of like you were the Lou Gehrig to the other players' Wally Pipp, or you were the Ringo Starr to Pete Best? Is that kind of the way you felt, or you just figured, hey, this will be a good thing to do for a week or so? And how did George?
Yeah, no. When I did it, I was just kind of like wanted something to do, and they were popular, and I thought, well, this could be fun. But once I heard the songs and met the girls and played with them, I really wanted that to be my band. I mean, I wanted to be in that band more than anything.
And what was it like when you think back to the early days? Like you had the 8 sold out shows. That was at the Whiskey A Go-Go, was it? Over a New Year's kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I hold on one second. Yes, it was incredible. I wrote about it so vividly. I mean, I made sure that I was really feeling things before I even tried to put it on the page. And It was just, you know, everything I had looked for. It was the one thing that had been missing. Standing on that stage, sold out shows, fans going crazy, and this is months and months before we got a record deal. In a lot of ways, I was kind of the final link. And, you know, once that happened, I just, all I wanted was to not be temporary. And within, it was just something, it was chemistry. We had chemistry. And that chemistry is still intact to this day. I mean, we've had over the years times where somebody couldn't play or, you know, wasn't in the band for maybe pregnancy or a family member, and we'd have to do something with a replacement, and it was never the same. So from the minute I played with them, the chemistry was really, really tangible, really evident, and really strong. It's been there for decades.
What did your other family members think of you being a rock star?
Well, my daughter's really proud. You know, sometimes she's 18 now, so she's used to it. But when she was a little girl, I'd take her on tour with me, and we, you know, we'd let her dance on the stage on some songs, and so she's really proud. And of course, my mom, I'm like, you know, the one, as she puts it, the one thing she didn't mess up in her life.
Kathy Valentine is with us talking about her memoir, All I Ever Wanted, a rock and roll memoir. Also time with the Go-Go's. Now the Go-Go's are still doing shows and stuff?
On and off. When there's the band officially retired from touring in 2016, but it's mainly just like booking like a regular tour. If something special comes up, the last shows we did were in 2018 at the Hollywood Bowl with the LA Philharmonica for, I think, 3 or 4 nights, and that was amazing. We did a few warm-up shows, and then we were supposed to tour to help kind of make a big event out of our documentary coming out this past summer, but we, you know, pandemic put a halt to that. And so now they've rescheduled the dates for this summer, but as everyone else, I don't really know what's going to happen. You know, I think it's all out of our hands. But I've got the spots, you know, carved out on my calendar, and hopefully we'll get to play. I really miss playing live. I've done so much playing, like, in front of my computer and making videos and stuff, but there's nothing like, you know, doing it live on stage with an audience.
Exactly. We're talking with Kathy Valentine. You know her from the Go-Go's. You also should now know her from her memoir, All I Ever Wanted. When you wrote the memoir, how did you write it? Did you write it by hand, on a typewriter, on a laptop? How did you do it?
Well, I read some books, like, I really liked Mary Carr's book, like The Art of Writing a Memoir. She wrote a book about writing memoirs, and I read other suggestions and things, and the one thing that stuck with me was to find a place where you really like to write. So I kind of took my home into account and thought, I really like my kitchen. And I had this little breakfast area. So I just got rid of the breakfast area, and I dragged a desk in there and set up my desktop. And that's where I enjoyed writing the most. And I had to deal with what writers we all call the 3 Ps, which was perfectionism, procrastination, and paralysis. I had to deal with each of the Ps and learn how to find a process, or I guess that's the 4th P, and overcome those things. So that was a big deal. And, you know, some writers, they carve out a certain amount of hours every day. That didn't work for me. I was a single mom raising a young teenage daughter. So I got in the habit of, you know, incremental progress. You know, I would sit down, if I had 30 minutes, let's sit down and try to get a little further.
Yep.
And that's how I wrote it. And it took a lot. I mean, when I first sat down to write it, and I wrote in a chronological way. That was the only way I could make sense out of everything. So I wasn't sure if that's how I would keep the structure, but that's how I had to write it. So I realized after about 6 or 7 months that I was just writing the first 3 chapters over and over and over, just revising and making them better and better. And I finally realized, okay, you're never going to finish this book if this is how you're going to, if this is how you write. So I started learning how to just kind of not edit or criticize myself and just get things down on the page, and then go back another time and see what was good out of that.
I've heard that.
It was really learning a process.
Yeah, sorry to butt in. Yeah, I've heard that the first draft you should just, like you said, let her rip and put everything out there, then go back afterwards and do the revisions. And a lot of people say 90% of the writing is the rewriting. Did you find that?
Yeah, but I'm also, I didn't eradicate my perfectionism. It's like I couldn't sit there with an entire draft of crap. So, I would edit as I went and revise as I went. Like I might write, like say my goal was I'm going to write 3 pages today, or I'm going to write 3 pages a day. I would make myself just spew it out, but probably the next day I would look over those 3 pages and start forming them a little bit. And then of course, from then on, I was revising and editing up until when the press said, no, you got the publisher said, you got to stop. No more changes.
No more changes. Enough of the perfectionism. We've got to get the product out there. Kathy Valentine is with us. All I Ever Wanted is the book, her rock and roll memoir. And you're through the University of Texas Press, which is a bit unusual. It's not the most common outlet one would think for a rock and roll memoir.
Well, the thing is, UT Press has, they're a nonprofit, so the one thing I liked about them was that they gave me freedom to write the book I wanted. It wasn't like, oh, you got to give us a spill all and, we just want the dirt and all that. Like they wanted me to write my story, and I really liked that. And I also like that they're a really respected and kind of classy little imprint. They have some really cool books by Vivian Goldman and a bunch of series of books about women, and Kristen Hirsch's book about Vic Chestnut, Don't Suck, Don't Die. I loved that book, and they had published that. So they had a pretty cool reputation for women-oriented music books, and I was proud to be a part of that tradition.
Kathy Valentine is with us. Looks like we have to wrap things up almost here. The book is All I Ever Wanted, a rock and roll memoir, and of course you know her mainly from the Go-Go's, I would guess. So a quick question, do girl bands have boy groupies? Not really. I'm finding out more now, after we broke up after our heyday and then we got back together and toured a lot more. That's when I started finding out how many guys actually liked the band. But no, we didn't have that so much. I think we had fans, but they weren't like groupies. And I wrote in my book that I think that could be its own like gender studies thesis for somebody. Like why would men not subjugate themselves to strong women? So that's interesting. Well, I have all my life. I've worked for women. I'm going to say under women, but that sounds kind of nasty. With women all my life. So it doesn't seem odd to me that would happen. And besides, you guys are kind of sexy. Know what I mean? Why not like the Go-Go's? Who didn't like the Go-Go's?
Yeah, I think we were sexy in that we were confident in doing a good job but that was another thing, was we didn't sexualize ourselves. So that might have been a signal to men, like, that's not what we're about. So I'm not sure why, but no, we didn't have male groupies. Now there would be females. We get to the hotel and there would be females sometimes.
Oh, well, it sounds wonderful, and I'm going to have to grab a copy of All I Ever Wanted, a rock and roll memoir from the University of Texas Press by Kathy Valentine. So what's coming up for you in the next 6 months or so?
Well, you might find it interesting, but I did the soundtrack to the book, and I felt like, what is something I can do that other writers can't do? And I can write music, and I was really into like making a soundtrack to the book, something that complemented taking the stories a step further and kind of intersecting my songwriting with the prose. And it was a fabulous thing. And it's on the audiobook, actually. The audiobook version of my book, which is available through Hachette and all the usual places you get audiobooks. I don't listen to them a lot, but the people that do have told me they just love it. So anyway, I love doing that so much that I'm really interested in continuing that modality of intersecting songwriting and prose. And I'd like for my next book to be a collection of short stories with an accompanying song for each one.
Oh.
It just really interests me, and it's challenging and exciting. And I do want to write a sequel to my memoir. My memoir covers 20 years, which is a slice of life, which is what a memoir is. An autobiography is your entire life, but this isn't that. And so this book ends in 1990 at the age of 30, and there's a whole other story arc that happens after that. So at one point, and it encompasses a whole other journey that's just as compelling and interesting. So one day I'll write a sequel to the memoir, but I don't want it to be like, oh, that's all she writes is memoirs. So the next one will be short stories, novels, fiction.
Great. We'll look forward to that. And in the meantime, we'll look forward to reading All I Ever Wanted, a rock and roll memoir by Kathryn Valentine. So, Kathy, thanks very much for taking time out of your busy schedule today to have a little chat with us up here in Radisson, Saskatchewan.
Thank you.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.